is often traced to the empire building capacity of power centers. If you take Nigeria, for example, before European conquest, very few empires existed in this country called Nigeria. The Benin Empire, the Edo Empire, the Borno Empire, and very recently, in the early 19th century, the Sokoto Caliphate, which some describe as the Fulani Empire. These were not empires. And one characteristics of these empires that we have in Nigeria was that they were power centers. In other words, they were able to consolidate their own political administration and government, and then expanded to extend that control over other states that they conquered. I mentioned a while ago, while I was trying to introduce this paper, that Benin, for example, was a great empire. Benin had common boundary with Oyo Empire towards the north at a location called Otu in Ekiti State. That was the boundary between the Benin Empire and the Oyo Empire. Then, of course, the Benin Empire also extended as far as to Lagos, which means Benin was able to exert its power and influence as far as to Lagos. And if you look at the newest of these empires, the Sokoto Caliphate, because it was able to bring, from Sokoto, it was able to bring all the various Hausa states that were conquered by the jihadists into a single Fulani empire, known as the Sokoto Caliphate. Because of time, let me just quickly go to other aspects. Now, British imperialism in Nigeria actually began with the naval bombardment, like I said, of 1851 and the conquest in 1861, and which was basically to extend the influence of Britain to this part of Africa. Two questions will arise immediately. Number one, why did the British, or what were the motives that compelled the conquest of Lagos in 1861? Secondly, why did the British also extend the conquest to the hinterland after 1861? I've attempted to answer these questions. The British Empire was an international system of dependencies that brought colonies, protectorates, dominions, mandates, and other territories under the sovereignty of the Crown of Great Britain and the administration of the British government. The British Empire originated with the overseas possession and trading posts established between the late 16th and early 17th or 18th centuries. Great Britain began to acquire overseas settlements as a result of maritime expansion, driven by commercial ambitions and by competitions with France. By the 20th century, Britain had one of the greatest empires in history. An empire has its own characteristics. Now, we're discussing empire and imperialism. To talk about empire, so we have an idea of what an empire is. It has its own characteristics. The first of these characteristics is expansionism. In other words, the empire wants to expand, particularly not within contiguous territories. It may expand beyond its original territory, like the case of England or Great Britain, expanding beyond Europe to Asia and to Africa. Now, the second characteristic of an empire is centralized power. In other words, and before a state can embark on imperialism or expansionism, it must have a centralized power. And of course, the third is the ethnic diversity of the empire itself. you will realize that once an empire or a state begins to expand and different peoples are conquered and brought under the control, it means they are now incorporating diverse groups, different ethnic groups into that empire. So whenever the idea of an empire is mentioned, what also comes to mind is that there is visibility of ethnic diversity. And of course, finally, you have the use of standardized currency. In other words, to ensure the means of exchange that will be readily available for commercial transactions. And this is what led to the evolution of monetary policies or financial policies. Empires always insist that there must be a means of exchange. It is that means of exchange that they use within the empire. If you look at the old Roman Empire, you will also see these characteristics visible. If you look at your empire, you also see their means of exchange. And if you look at the empire of Alexander the Great, we also find these four characteristics. Now, Nigeria, as I mentioned, was not located near Great Britain at all, but all of these characteristics, they were visible and present in the British Empire in Nigeria. Now, I also argue that a second aspect of imperialism is hegemony. Now, hegemony is the social, cultural, ideological, economic influence exerted by a dominant power. In other words, hegemony relates to the power of the empire to impose its imperial structure, to create stability and peace, and then develop extensive networks that opens to their trade and profit. All emperors or states that have built empires, they've always been concerned about the enormous benefits economically from trade that they engage in, and also from the spoils of war. And of course, when we look at hegemony, we also look at the cultural sophistication that is imposed upon the conquered states. One writer that I admire, Howard Spodek, is a historian. He has argued that there is always an imperial ideology that rulers would like to impose their government through dominance and the exercise of shared power. In these circumstances, they use military force and they try to use it in case of resistance. Dominance in discussing empire and imperialism is simply power and influence. Power and influence over others, to rule them, to control them, to exercise authority and supremacy, domination and dominion. Now, this is what we are going to find in Nigeria from 1861 up to 1960.